trying to fix my background here.
And we are live. It is Friday, geeks, and welcome to another edition, actually a very special edition, of the Friday Night Geek Show. I am Dante D, and welcome to the channel where we talk about comic books and other geek stuff. With me tonight, we have a very, very special guest. For years and years, it was believed that only one man created Batman. One man was behind the bat, and everyone thought that was Bob Kane. But history knows better, and people in the comic book industry knew better, and it has now come to light that a man named Bill Finger also created Batman. It was probably contributed more to Batman than any other person who ever worked on Batman. And with me to talk about Bill Finger this evening is his granddaughter, Athena Finger. Athena, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
It is a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for coming out to do this. So I just want to jump right into this. For those of you that are going to be watching this tonight, tell us a little bit about Bill Finger, because I actually posted a video about Bill Finger early on in the week, and a few people were reaching out to me, and they were like, I had no idea about this. So why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Bill, my grandfather, Bill Finger, he was an aspiring writer, and he connected with Bob Kane, and they started working on storylines that Bob had already established. And, the popularity of Superman at the time kind of sparked Bob Kane to want to make some of the money that Siegel and Schuster were making. So he approached National Comics, which is now DC, about, what if I come up with a superhero? Like, what will you pay me, basically? And so he took his initial concept of Batman, which is not what we see today at all. I'm sure some people have seen the original concept. He was wearing a red unitard with blonde hair, a little domino mask, and big stiff wings, and looked ridiculous. Looked nothing like a Batman. Bright red does not really go with the whole bat theme or what a bat looks like. A bat is dark, usually black, brown, gray.
Right. He actually looked a little bit like Robin. Like Robin with blonde hair, right?
Yeah. A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely nothing like Batman.
No, nothing. So since Bill and Bob had already been working together, he took his concept to Bill, and Bill, being a very visual writer, was like, well, this isn't really going to, put any fear into criminals or anything like that. It doesn't even really look like a bat, and these wings are not very practical. So he decided to, suggest changing the color scheme to something dark. So the dark gray and black and blue color scheme. Get rid of the big stiff wings and make a cape that was scalloped, so it looked like wings when he was jumping from the rooftops and things like that.
Right.
He suggested putting a cowl on him with the ears so that his shadow looked more bat-like. The gauntlets, the whole persona of him, the name Bruce Wayne, the backstory of why he became Batman. He named Gotham City. He came up with a lot of the villains, and the Robin character, like you had mentioned, back in the 30s and the 40s, we didn't have all this inner dialogue that was accepted. If you were talking to yourself, you were considered crazy and thrown into a loony bin. So he's like, you really need someone to talk to. So that's how Robin came about, and had a sidekick so that he had someone to fight crime with and have conversations with. So, a lot of that came from Bill, and the original storylines came from Bill. He really was the one that set the whole foundation for the mythos.
Absolutely. And now, and I discovered also that he didn't only contribute to Batman, but he also contributed to some other characters like Green Lantern and some others. Why don't you tell us about those as well?
Yeah, he was the co-creator of the original Green Lantern, Alan Scott, and he was the co-creator of Wildcat. He also wrote for Superman. He wrote the first Kryptonite story. Kryptonite was first introduced on the Superman radio show, but he was the first one to actually put it in the comic. And he was really about the human element, so, you know, kind of taking that kryptonite and making it so that Superman was more human and not so superhuman and things like that. Um, he wrote for Timely, which is now Marvel. He wrote for other smaller titles that got, you know, either went out of business or got consumed by the other comic book companies. So he was, you know, very busy with his comic book writing.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I get into the next question, we have many people that are rolling in here. Just shout out here to Aiden Rodriguez, Adrian Bedingfield, Brendan Sellers, Lovell Lucas Jr., Brazilian Goddess, Studio Fitness, who's saying hello to both me and yourself, and Jesse Lynch, and I'm sure many others are going to be rolling in tonight. I believe so many people here have questions for you. Actually, this first question here, I think might be a good one here from Aiden Rodriguez. And that is, how do you feel about being related to the co-creator of Batman?
Oh, well, that was definitely a mixed bag for a long time. Well, when I was younger, if you haven't seen the documentary on Hulu, Batman and Bill, which I do talk about this, when I was younger, it was cool, but at the same time, it was, you know, I didn't have proof like we do now with the internet and having, you know, go Google it, you know. We didn't have that in the 80s when I was a small child. And so people sometimes would question me or not believe me. And that was kind of difficult to deal with growing up, because you knew that, you know, your grandfather did this really cool thing, and you know, not really having, here's the proof, you know.
Right.
So, I mean, when I was younger, it was kind of tough. And then, you know, after my father passed away when I was a teenager, it was even a little harder, because I knew that it wasn't resolved and I didn't know exactly what to do. And I was kind of discouraged from pursuing getting Bill's credit, things like that. Which actually, I didn't talk about Batman and my grandfather for about 15 years after my father passed away, because I just didn't want to deal with, you know, oh, really? Like, where's your millions of dollars if your grandfather did this? And I'm like, well, you know, he didn't get credit, so he didn't get any of the benefits that Bob Kane got. So it's, you know, and that makes it even harder when people don't see the financial reward for something like that, because they automatically assume, since Batman's so huge, that, you know, where's your mansion in Hollywood, you know, type stuff. Like, well, we live in reality. This is not what's going on here. So, I mean, It wasn't really until Mark Nobleman got in touch with me in 2006, 2007, that I started talking about Batman again and my grandfather and the whole connection. And kind of went from there. I started not shying away from it so much. It was still pretty painful, because it did bring up a lot of family stuff from when my father passed away, and you know, family that I don't have connection with and things like that. But at the same time, I was learning so much about my grandfather that I had no idea about because of Mark's research, that I was like, wow, like there's a whole other side of my family that I absolutely knew nothing about, other than he did this really cool thing and was so influential in the comic industry, but didn't get any credit. So it was like this weird story. It was tragic, but it was really cool that, you know, he had this connection. So, I mean, once I started meeting more people in the industry and the fans, was when I really started to feel more positive about the connection, and about my grandfather's story, and seeing that there is, you know, people out there who knew him. I mean, I grew up thinking that it was just my dad and I and a few other people that knew about him, but
Right.
There was a whole community of people that actually knew about him. And then I also saw that a lot of people didn't know what the true history of Batman is and who these creative forces were behind the character in these fabulous stories and why people connect to the character so much and things like that. So I kind of felt like it was my job to correct that history and really embrace that part of the story and not, oh well, he got screwed, let's correct that. No, this is worldwide. People know who Batman is. They've been fed this lie about who the creator was for 70 plus years at that point. And
Right.
that's an injustice to the fans because the fans really want to know the truth. They want to know everything about everything when they are into a particular genre or their fandom. They want to know everything about it, and they shouldn't be fed a lie. This should be give accurate facts and history about how this happened and why it happened and who was involved. So that was the whole other side of my campaign, was to make sure that people really did know what happened.
Correct. And Adrian Benningfield, thank you so much for your super chat of $2. His question is, Athena, did your family get repaid for any of it? Now, before we address this, for any further questions, we just cannot ask any questions about any settlements with DC. But I just wanted to fill in some of the audience this evening about the documentary Batman and Bill. Because there was a little bit of that discussed in that. So there's a documentary on Hulu called Batman and Bill, and a writer named Mark Tyler Nobleman did some research on Bill Finger because he knew this whole other side of Bill Finger, and he actually found Athena through extensive and exhaustive research. Like I've watched the documentary about 4 times now because I was just so in awe with it, and I probably memorized the first few lines of it. But, but yeah. So now, when Athena was first discovered and you were hooked up with DC, there was a little bit like you got royalty checks from the Dark Knight, correct?
Right, the reprints. So like the compilation books of all the Golden Age comics and things like that. They were kind of, it wasn't just Bill that they did this for. They did this for a lot of the other talent that didn't get what they should have gotten, I guess. They started giving them, kind of these small amounts of money for reprints and things like that. So, I mean, it really wasn't very much, but I mean, it was something. And, it was okay. It was a start. And, it just kind of had to go through the legal process after that.
Well, exactly. And let's just put it this way. I'll have you do the math because Athena's not wearing an ascot just like Bob Kane used to. So I think you guys, the guy wore an ascot.
Bob, I drive a Toyota.
Yeah, exactly. And she did not show up. She did not show up to any premieres wearing a cape. You've heard that, right? Yeah, he wore a cape at, I think, the premiere. Yeah.
He was a showman. That's what he was about. He wanted to be famous. That was
right.
His goal, was to be famous. And he was the first person in that industry who was famous. I mean, he achieved his goal.
Right.
And it was kind of bizarre. Like, people were like, why do you want to do this? We write these funny books for children. But he was kind of had that forethought to see that it could be something so much more other than just a funny book for kids.
Right.
So, I mean, people like to hate on Bob. And yes, he has a horrible reputation, which he did to himself. But there were certain things that he was really good at. And, one of his things that was really good at was finding talent and putting it together. And he really did see a glimpse in the future that, comics were more than just something that kids are going to read. and that there is a market to be famous and to profit off of your characters.
Absolutely. Now,
So,
I'm sure the question, because I think one thing we can say, I don't know if some people will call it a positive, some will call it a negative, but I think one thing we could say about Bob Kane is he was a businessman, and businessmen are not always the, you know,
most
they're
ethical.
most ethical, and yeah, exactly, and they're not, they're definitely not saints, correct? So yeah, I mean, Jim Steranko famously told, I don't know how he got the information, but probably from others that worked in the industry. But I guess Bob Kane's father was a lawyer, and
Yeah.
he found a way, and he basically encouraged Bob to get DC to sign over a piece of the pie, even back in 1939. Whereas Siegel and Schuster had no rights to Superman at all until the 1970s. Yeah, so
Well, Siegel and Schuster were kind of swindled by National Comics. I mean, they were children basically when they were doing Superman, and when they lost the rights, they didn't realize that they were signing away their rights to their character. And they started fighting for their rights again right away. I mean, I think a year or two later, after they had signed their rights away, they started pursuing to get their rights back for Superman. Um, Again, businesses don't have to be ethical, and they don't have morals, so they're going to do whatever they can to keep the bottom line.
right.
And that's pretty much what they did to Siegel and Schuster, and that they still were fighting that case up until I believe 2016, 17.
Right.
When they finally were able to close the chapter on that, I believe. I haven't kept up on it recently. I don't know if they're still fighting, but I know that they had made special deals with the families so that they can move forward to use the Superman character. Because if you notice, there was a lull for a long time. There was really nothing going on after Christopher Reeves in the 80s.
Right.
And that's because of the legality. They didn't have the right to use Superman, basically, and that's why we didn't see any Superman movies and things like that for quite some time. And they even kind of got around the legality of that by changing Superman's story a little bit so that they could make some money off of this character that started the whole whole company basically was Superman.
Right. Absolutely. Now, I'm sure many people are wondering, how could this happen? How could Bill basically, like, I mean, when people think Golden Age greats, they think like William Gaines, they think like, Eisner, they think, so many people, but it wasn't until recently that anyone really ever mentioned Bill Finger's name, despite all his contributions to the medium. So how did this happen? Explain to everyone maybe.
Well, one of the reasons why Bill's name wasn't on the character, other than the deal that Bob Kane had made, it was common in the industry that only one name appeared in the comic, and it was usually the person who drew it, not the writer.
Okay.
The Superman boys were unique where they both were mentioned. That was unusual, but they really were a partnership. They really worked together. They had an agreement. They wanted to share the credit because they knew that they both had a very important role with Superman. That wasn't the case with most of the writer-artist relationship and the industry as a whole. So it wasn't that 100%, Bob was just trying to leave Bill out of it. Was kind of an industry norm that only one name was attached to it. But Bob did make sure that he was the only one that got credit for creating the character, which was incorrect. Because it really was the two of them. Yes, Bob's original concept is not what we see now. But if he had not taken that to Bill and have Bill alter it to what we have now, there wouldn't be any Batman. So, it kind of was a sore issue because, like we said in the beginning, Bill really was a driving force behind the character. He's the one that came up with so much that we know and love about the character and was not known. Now, he was known in the industry and, he was known with some of the fans. He just wasn't, in the spotlight. But he also didn't really want to be in the spotlight. He was kind of a recluse and did his own thing and had a family and was at his typewriter or doing research for stories. I mean, he was an artist. If you think of most artists, they're not really, extroverts. They're kind of introverts and they do their thing and they're creative and they, unless you're, movie star or something,
Absolutely.
That's not what they were doing.
Yeah, and like obviously I've never met Bill, but just from watching different sources, like I saw the NBC interview with your dad, in which your dad talks a little bit about Bill, and even just hearing Bill's voice, like and for those of you that have never heard Bill Finger speak, he has the most soothing, calm, deep voice. He just sounds like an all-around nice guy. He actually has a little bit of a radio voice, right? Very good diction. He's very articulate. Just great, right? So I don't think he really. It doesn't sound like he was that type of guy that really would have pursued like would have been confrontational with anybody in the industry.
No, I don't think so either. I think he was more about the writing and creating really good stories than fighting or pursuing fame, because I mean it's pretty consuming, and also it's a different type of personality to want that part of being famous and having to deal with that. Even when he did the convention, which was another first, was he was one of the first people in the industry who went to a convention and had a panel. Like, he was part of the beginning of what we see as comic conventions now. He was kind of pushed into that, and he kind of had a little bit of backlash because he would talk about how he co-created Batman, and Bob got really upset about that and got upset about the interview that he did with Jerry Bales, and like there was a whole feud between the two of them at that point. But I think Bill also recognized the importance of telling his story and the story of Batman while he was still able to. So, and I think he did it in a way that was non-confrontational, because he didn't want to fight and he didn't want to lose the work. He was a struggling artist, and he didn't want to seem like he was someone that was going to cause problems or, make problems for the company or for other artists. So I think that's why he was so level-headed about it.
Right, and he was working for DC Comics at the time. Bill Finger eventually did become employed with DC Comics, and you said probably throughout the the 1940s and 50s he lived quite a decent middle class life, right?
Well,
and it wasn't.
He was working for the company. He was writing for Batman title and Detective Comics, and for World's Finest. He, like I said, with the Green Lantern, Wildcat, which those two characters were put into the Justice League and the World's Finest. And so he was writing for a lot of different titles within the company. So, I mean, he was successful for that time. He just wasn't making, kudo, bunches and bunches of money. I mean, he was able to support his family and not live on the street and have a nice apartment and have a child and a wife and, have that American life.
Yeah.
But he wasn't, he didn't come from wealth. Bob Kane came from wealth. So there's a difference there also.
Right, absolutely, and it's really interesting to even hear Bob Kane when he talks about his past. That he says he grew up so poor, and then you hear that the man's father was an attorney.
Yeah.
It's just, like, what was your definition of poor? That you had to share a bedroom, like, but yeah, no. So just to fill some fans in, so Bill Finger makes an appearance at Comic-Con, probably his only Comic-Con appearance. That was in 1965.
65 or 66? Yeah.
65 or 66. So
yeah.
he makes an appearance at this Comic-Con, and he talks about his work on Batman. Yeah. And the man who actually ran the Comic-Con and organized and everything was a man named Jerry Bales. And if you don't know who Jerry Bales is, he's often considered to be the father of comic book fandom. Yeah. Bill Finger didn't even come out and start saying it was me. He talked about his work, but then not too long after, Jerry Bales publishes an article in a comic book fanzine called "A Finger in Every Plot," and basically talks about Bill Finger's role in Batman. And what happens is Bob Kane has a toddler fit. What did Bob Kane?
Yes, he did.
So what did Bob Kane say, Athena? Why don't you let everyone know?
He called Bill a liar, and that he, was making out more of what his contributions were, and that it was really just him, and how dare he claim that he did all this stuff for Batman, and just solidifying the lie that he had been living up until that point. Which is too bad. I mean, he had an opportunity to say, yeah, Bill did play a huge part in the creation of Batman, and he chose to not do that and decided that he was gonna just keep pushing the fact that he was the sole creator and wrote all the books and drew all the stories and did everything himself.
Which is what's funny is he mostly didn't, because I mean, as we know, and it's not that we're here to trash Bob Kane tonight, but he had many ghost artists as well. Many confrontations with other artists. Jerry Robinson is another notable artist who he had a lot of issues with, and there was even I'm sure you've heard of this, Athena, but Bob Kane had a television show at one point where he would go on and draw pictures for kids, and
not drawn by him.
They were not drawn by him.
Sketched, and he would trace over it. Yes.
Exactly. So when you
surprise me,
right? So when you hear this kind of stuff, you can. It kind of makes you wonder: was the guy really just not that great of an artist, or was he just lazy?
No, he was not a very good artist, according to other people in the industry, including Jerry Robinson. He just wasn't very good at it. And he would do the sketches for the panels, and Jerry would get them, and he would have to correct all of them. So he just wasn't very good. Even when his claim to fame with the clown paintings, you've heard about this, right? He didn't even do the clown paintings. He had a ghost artist do them. Come on. Really?
It's just, and when you hear these kind of things, it's just like, how did this guy make all this cash without even doing anything? The guy essentially didn't really do anything. But he made all this cash. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, he just knew how to play the system.
Yeah, so.
But I mean, his reputation now because of it. I mean, he's got a horrible reputation. And I'm sorry, no penny is worth that. I'd rather be poor and have a great reputation and be known as a wonderful creator, artist, whatever. Or instead of being known as this shyster who took advantage of anyone and everyone that I came across. And that's pretty much what he did.
Right. And I'm sure you've even heard he would go out to dinner with Stan Lee, and he would stop waiters all the time and say, "Hey, do you know who I am? I created Batman." And he'd do little.
I know, but Stan Lee wasn't any better.
He wasn't.
Good friends.
Yeah, exactly. There was a whole debacle with Jack Kirby, so definitely that was another story in and of itself for sure. So so basically, Bob Kane comes out, throws Bill under the bus, says, "You didn't do anything. It was all me."
Yes.
What do you think Bill was thinking at this time?
Oh, I think he was just disgusted. I mean, I'm sure. Like one time they were friends, and then your friend is totally scabbing you in the back and just calling you a liar publicly, and that you didn't have this role. And it's just, I'm sure it was heartbreaking for him. But, I think he was also more concerned with how he was going to survive. I mean, he was in dire need of work. I mean, he wasn't treated very well. He was pushed off Batman because he was getting older and he wanted health insurance. He, had to take jobs wherever he could get them. I mean, he was writing for the army at one time. He was writing, I believe, like woodworking manuals and like whatever he could get the money or the paycheck. I think that's where he was at. Um, which is really sad. I mean, it's this amazing talent that was kind of left on the bottom of the shoe of the industry. Ugh.
Absolutely. And Lovell Lucas Jr., very creative individual himself, leaves some pretty cool comments on the channel. Thank you for your super chat, $2. Would your grandpa feel proud seeing fans today, do you think, Athena?
Oh, yeah. I think he would be blown away by the popularity and the magnitude of this character. I mean, when they came up with these, they didn't think that they were going to be around for 80 years, 80 plus years now. I think that he would be kind of, overwhelmed with the fact that Batman is, the most recognized character worldwide, not just in the US. So I think that he would be, even more humbled by it, I think. Because, I mean, he was already pretty humble. If you, like you said, when you hear his voice, he's very even keeled and, not flashy and just really, this is who I am, this is the situation, type. And I think that he would be, right there. I think he would embrace it once he was more known in the in the fans world and being able to share his story. But unfortunately, he passed away so young. He wasn't able to see the magnitude of his character.
Absolutely. Now, so basically, by the time of the 1970s, as Athena mentioned, all this new blood was coming into DC Comics, into Marvel. You had Denny O'Neil, you had Neil Adams, these new like rock stars almost. Right. And older guys like Bill, they had a hard time finding work. So this is the point at which Bill starts getting into some financial trouble. He had been divorced by this point, correct? Yeah. Yep. And he was living alone in New York, yeah. Correct? Yeah. So he was living alone in New York, and he was having, like Athena said, difficult time, just trying to make ends meet, just taking whatever work he could. So clearly, I think it goes without saying that Bob Kane and Bill didn't really talk, during this time, correct?
I don't think so. I don't think they had a relationship.
Right.
And I think probably the response to Bill's interview, where Bob kind of, threw him under the bus, kind of solidified the relationship to be non-existent at that point.
Correct. Yeah. So, and unfortunately, Bill did pass away in it was 1974.
Yes.
Correct. He passed away in 1974, penniless, and never received any credit for his character at all, which I think is probably, when you think about creators getting screwed out of their characters, I think this one takes the #1 spot. Because I mean, yeah, Siegel and Schuster's story was sad, but they lived to see their name get put on Superman, and there are many others, but I just, to this day, I still feel so bad that Bill never got to see that credit, his name on the work, right? So, yeah, for sure. Now let's talk a little bit more about you. So, because because you're Bill's legacy now, and you go around the country and you talk about this. You get fans informed that, hey, it wasn't just Bob Kane, it was Bill Finger as well, and actually it was mostly Bill Finger. At what point did you realize that you had a connection to Batman?
Oh, well, I mean, my father told me at a young age about his father, so I have known about Bill my whole life. It's just the rest of the world was finding out, and still finding out, because people still, like you said, there's still people that don't know the true history. And, I kind of accepted this role on where I am the one to represent the creators, and it's not just Bill's story, it's the creator's story. And since nobody else in the within the Batman family of that golden age is out there telling the story, I've kind of taken it upon myself to make sure that I do tell the story and that I do inform the fans of the true history and let them realize that this is a great character, but it's got a pretty shady background.
Right.
And it's such a human story. People are like, oh wow, and then they want to find out more and they get really intrigued, and then they educate themselves a little more about the comic industry of that time. So it's kind of an awakening for fans, and I want people to be aware of what was going on and how these talents were brought together and how Batman became what he is now. So I was a little nervous in the beginning because I didn't grow up with comics. I didn't read comics. I wasn't part of that culture. But the fans have been so awesome. I was like, oh, you're gonna get mad at me because I don't read comics, and they were like, no. If you're not reading it, you should read this, and you should read that, and have you checked out this, and do you know this person? And I'm like, oh no, I don't know any of this stuff, but I guess I gotta learn.
Right, and you know what? And I tell people all the time, because this being a comic book channel, it's actually kind of funny that something like comic books in this day and age has become almost pretentious. But I kind of always try to remind people that you could have read one Batman book or hundreds. Just because you've read one or none and just like the character doesn't make you any less of a fan, right?
Exactly.
I mean,
I was a huge fan of the animated series. Like, I was more about the visual stuff, the movies, the TV shows, and things like that. When the animated series came out, I was in art school. I was in high school still, but I was in art school. So I was really fascinated about the animation style and things like that. I liked the grittiness of that particular series. I mean, when I was really little, I was watching like Super Friends and the whole 60s and 70s cartoons and things like that. So, which was very different. They were very bright and campy, and the animated series was very dark and serious and like had these really great storylines and brought in some really cool new characters and things like that. So that was really what I gravitated towards more, because growing up and still to this day, I'm a huge horror genre person. I love scary movies and blood and guts and slashers and thrillers and murder mysteries and things like that. That's what I went to. I went to that whole other crazy genre of the world.
Yeah, and you know what? Actually, it's really hilarious because Batman is one of those characters that is exceptional because he has kind of like a cross-genre appeal. You could put Batman, in the 1960s, doing the Batoozy, and then
I love that. I mean, I was so excited when I got to meet Adam West. I mean, that's a piece of my childhood right there. And I was like, oh my God, Adam West, this is so awesome.
Yeah, exactly. But then on top of it, you could take Batman, and then you can get like these really, really dark storylines, like Batman the Killing Joke, or even Batman Damned, one of the more recent ones, so like it's just great. Like you just do so much with the character. Unlike right. Exactly. Unlike a character like Superman. I mean, I love Superman too, but I mean, there's only so much you can do with the character, right? So
right. Well, he's kind of pigeonholed into one specific role in his role in the superhero genre. And I mean, I know that they've tried to do some things with making, his alter ego Bizarro and things like that, and trying to make him dark at times. But it's really hard to do that when he was created as this wholesome icon. Like, he's only going to do good, and he's all about doing good for the people. And like, it's kind of hard to break away from that mold, where Batman came from a dark place to begin with.
Exactly.
So that just gives the whole world to play with. Because, I mean, there's so many avenues that somebody could go into dealing with that trauma. You could go and do what he did, which was fight crime and become a detective, or you could go the complete opposite and go completely insane and be more like the Joker and cause mayhem all the way around you, or you could completely just go into a hole and not do anything. So, I mean, there's so many different paths that storyline could go into, that he wasn't pigeonholed. Plus, he's a human.
Yeah.
And so humans react in very different ways. So, again, that gives you a whole, wide range of things that you can do with the character.
Absolutely. So now, you were little, you were in school, you did a report in the 3rd grade that you were talking about the documentary, and everyone thought you were lying when you said my grandpa created Batman. Yeah. Tell me, so I think you told me that you kind of kept quiet about it for a while, but tell me that in 2008, when you showed up to the Dark Knight premiere, that you called someone up the next day and said, "Ha, I told you so." Like, did you have that moment? Like, did you feel vindicated? Like,
no, because I don't talk to most of those people.
Right.
It's funny that you say that. I have a friend that she and I went to school from kindergarten all the way through 8th grade together, and we were very good friends. And she just recently watched the Batman and Bill documentary, and she sent me a message, and she's like, I did not realize how bullied you were over that, and wow, I wish I was aware of that, because I would have stood up for you a little more. I just didn't feel the need, but people from that school, from my class, did reach out to me on Facebook and say, congratulations on getting for your grandfather. Like, and I was like, oh, wow, thanks. And I can't say exactly who, questioned me or whatever. I mean, it was such a long time ago, but obviously it affected me, because I still remember being questioned about it. And I'm like, why are you questioning me about this? Is this part of my family?
Right.
So I thought that was kind of cool, but I didn't feel the need. I'm not really that type of a person that needs to, like, look, see, I told you. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, that's not who I am. Like, I know, and now more of the world knows, and we have the internet to share information, and the comic book culture is huge now. It's not this basement, geek in his mom's basement reading comics and going to some shady hotel and going to a swap or something. You know what I mean? It's like a completely different level now. So,
right.
And I don't feel like I needed to prove anything to anybody.
That's good.
Fine, you don't want to believe me? Don't believe me. But exactly. I know the truth. There's other people out there that know the truth. important people in this world, in the industry, and in the culture that know the true history. And that's more important to me than somebody I went to third grade with.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
like, perspective.
Yeah, that's good. And actually, some people noted your positivity here. Where is it here? Oh, these comments are flying in so much I can't even keep up with them here. Yeah, but don't. Here we go. Yeah, here we go. Christopher Johnson, your positivity and energy is amazing. So look at that. And that's how you got to be, right? Because I think for as dark a character as Batman is, I think most of us need to know that story of Bill, because I don't know about everybody else, but like when I found out about Bob and like the way he was, and and Jim, even hearing Jim Steranko talking about him, I'm like, this is my favorite superhero. And like the so-called creator was nothing like Batman. You know what I mean? Like, so I really feel that the spirit of Batman, we can put that in Bill, and we can feel better about it.
Yeah.
For sure. Now, like you're going to cons all over the country.
I tried.
Yeah.
It's so hard right now.
Yeah. Well, obviously, right now it's very. What have been some of your highlights going to some of these Comic-Cons?
Oh, well, I mean, the very first one I went to, which was in St. Louis, my friend who had brought me into it, who's in the documentary, Travis Langley, he had asked me before I even started planning to go to conventions with him. He's like, so who in the industry do you want to meet? And I'm like, well, I want to meet Adam West. He's like, okay, he's friends with me. That's fine. We can do that. He'll be at St. Louis. I'm like, oh, okay. He's like, who else? And I'm like, Kevin Smith, because I know he's a huge fan and I like his movies. And he's like, I'll work on that
one. But you got to meet Kevin Smith. There are pictures of you with him online. Yeah.
If you want to hear that story, I'll tell you that story. But so the very first convention I went to was in St. Louis. Now, I mean, I had gone to a convention in Boston when I lived up there, but it was more like a flea market. People were selling random stuff, and they had comics there, and it was, in a hotel ballroom, and it's not like there were panels or anything there. It was just more like, a meet and swap type or a flea market type situation. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to buy anything here, but okay, let's see if they have anything that have my grandfather's name on it. I was always trying to find something. And of course, never finding anything. It's a lost cause.
up until a few years ago, anyway. Yeah.
So, I mean, he was like, you're going to do 2 panels. And I'm like, okay, I've never done panels before. Like, what are we doing? And he's like, well, one's going to be about the 75th anniversary, because 2014 was the 75th anniversary of Batman. It was kind of, they wanted to bring me out to celebrate and things like that. So, it was time for me to kind of come into the public eye and represent Bill and be the person that people can come and give thanks to and things like that. And I understood my role at that point. So I was a little nervous about the panels. I'd never done panels before. But I mean, it was pretty easy. I'm like, do I need to prepare for these? He's like, no, it's just like a conversation. You won't be up there by yourself. There'll be a bunch of us. And I'm like, okay. And like I said, Adam West was there, and that was like one of the first things that we did was I was introduced to him because he was doing the opening speech for the convention, and he was super sweet. He asked if my grandfather was still alive, and I'm like, no, he would have been 100, and no, he died in 74, but that's really kind of you to think that he was still alive. Yeah. He was very sweet. He took pictures with my son and I, and we chit-chatted for a little while. And, I mean, he was just a lovely man. He really was. And I was very honored to be able to meet him. So.
That's great. Well, I'm glad you got to meet your hero. That's wonderful, Now,
the first one I aside from the cartoons, but as far as live action, I'm like, well, he's the first one I've ever seen growing up, and I would love to be able to meet him. And I try to meet as many of the Batmans as I can, and I've kind of been successful. Some of them are not so successful, and but it's been interesting.
Kevin Conroy?
I've met Kevin Conroy a few times.
Yeah.
He was actually at the street unveiling with me a couple years ago in the Bronx. At Poe Park, they named one of the side streets that runs along Poe Park, Bill Finger Way. So he was there for the unveiling of the street sign. He was very
awesome.
Nice. I met him in 2015, I believe, at a panel that he did with Mark and Kevin Smith. I was supposed to meet Kevin Smith that night, but he had to run off and couldn't stick around, and so whatever.
It's unbelievable. The dude actually sounds like that. He actually sounds like
yeah.
Unbelievable. James RFB, thank you so much for your super chat. His question is for Dante and Athena, who is your favorite actor to have portrayed Batman and why? So I'll let you go first.
All right, the most common question. I actually have two, but my original was Michael Keaton. He did an amazing job with the character in '89 when the Batman movie came out. He was able to really take on both Batman and Bruce Wayne. I think some people are good at one and not the other, but he was able to do both. And I love Tim Burton's movies, so I mean it was an amazing team for that movie. And I know people are gonna hate this, but I think Ben Affleck also did an amazing job. I'm sorry that the movies sucked and they weren't very good. That's not his fault. He had no control over that, but he's an amazing actor, and I think he did very well again portraying both characters.
Yeah.
He did really well as Batman and as the tormented Bruce Wayne. I think he really did it very spot on and did a great job with it. I think people hate on him because they didn't like the movies and they can't separate the movie from the actor.
Yeah, and I actually would agree with that. When I heard about Ben Affleck playing Batman, I was kind of taken aback a little bit because I just think of him in other movies like Good Will Hunting and things like that, and he's just like the guy from Boston, But I was actually really, and you're from Massachusetts too, right? So yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, I think he did actually a great job, and I have to say the movies, not so much the Justice League movie, but the Batman v Superman, for me, it had its moments. Like that whole battle between Batman and Superman, I absolutely loved it. I thought it was really, really well done. But I have to say my all-time favorite Batman, and he's didn't really portray Batman on screen. For me, it's Kevin Conroy, because whenever I read the comics, all I hear is that voice. That voice is stuck in my head, and Mark Hamill's Joker is stuck in my head too every time, But I mean, if we're going to talk screen, I definitely would probably agree with you with the Michael Keaton. I was going to say George Clooney, but everyone probably would have shut the stream off right now. So.
I like Val Kilmer too. I mean, I think he did.
Yeah, he did Tortured really well, I have to say.
He did.
Yeah.
But people didn't like that movie either. So
I honestly, I'm really curious to see James Pattinson as Batman, because I think he just has that really like sultry and like tortured type look about him. Everyone thinks of him, as Edward Cullen and Teen Heartbreak, but I honestly think he's going to surprise us because like he looks.
Twilight movies. I've seen only a couple of his movies, and the last one that I watched was The Lighthouse that he did with William Dafoe. Did you see this movie?
No, I haven't seen that one. No.
Oh my God. It is twisted. I mean, it was so good. I love the fact that it was all filmed in black and white. It's just the two of them. The whole movie. It's just these two men on an island dealing with the lighthouse. I mean, so well done. He is an amazing actor. And for him to keep up with another amazing actor like William Dafoe, I mean, that speaks volumes for this
For
actor.
sure.
I'm sorry. I have not seen a single Twilight movie. I've never read the books. I never saw the movies. I had no desire to see them. Like, so I'm not tainted by this whole sparkly vampire crap that people are like, he's a vampire that sparkles. And I'm like, what?
Right.
I'm like, did you see Lighthouse?
Right. Yep. For sure. I'm gonna have to check that movie out now that you mention it, for sure. Now I have two more questions. One, I'm sure everybody wants to know, because it's come up on the channel a few times.
Okay.
Is why is it everyone is so upset that it is Bob Kane with Bill Finger as opposed to Bob Kane and Bill Finger? So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
I don't know why people are so upset about that. I think with is more accurate anyways.
Right.
They did it together.
Right.
It means the same thing. They did it together.
It does. Right.
I know that it was more to deal with appeasing all parties, because they still have to deal with the Kane estate and things like that. So I have always said there's got to be some language that they could use to put the two names together. And I'm perfectly fine with. I mean,
good.
With Bill.
Right.
They did it together. It was Bob with Bill.
Right.
It's English. That's how you would describe it.
Exactly. Perfect. So there you have it, folks. That's the language, and the heir of Bill Finger is okay with it. So.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I know people are upset about it, and I've had a lot of people just say, I just skim over it and I see and anyways, and I'm like, well, then that's what you want to do. I mean, whatever. It's it's not really. The point is that his name is there. That's right. The important part, not the word the.
Right.
Or actually, the word with, or the word and, or both names are there, and it will be there forever now. And the history has been corrected, and that was the point.
This is actually a good one. Jesse Lynch says, "Why not Bill Finger with Bob Kane?" I like that. That would stir up a few pots, I think.
Yeah, that would be no problem.
Yeah, so for sure.
Apparently, if you ask Alexa from Google who created Batman, it says Bill Finger and then Bob Kane.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to do that. Now, your Siri was talking a little earlier. Does Siri do the same thing, or?
I don't know. Should we find out?
Yeah. Try it out.
Okay. Hey Siri. Oh, let me turn the volume up.
Yep.
I can't make this any louder.
Yes, you can. So, who created Batman? Who created Batman?
The answer I found is Bill Finger and Bob Kane.
They corrected it.
I think it's alphabetical.
Oh, okay.
I think that's why.
It could be, and I'm gonna just say that the tech companies are correcting history, but but maybe I think you're right. Yours is the more logical answer.
That's the mathematician in me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's the mathematician in you. Now the two my two questions has now turned into three. Now, what kind of do you have any connection or interactions with the Bob Kane family at all nowadays? No. Okay, so that they haven't reached out to you at all, and I think they're probably a little sensitive about that anyway.
Well, Mrs. Kane is very old, and
okay.
She's very old, and she's not going to be around for much longer if she hasn't passed already. I don't think she has yet, but the last I heard, she was not doing very well. And his daughter wants nothing to do with it. I've never met her. I've never heard her talk about anything related to the Batman story or her father or anything like that. So that's why I kind of mentioned earlier, I've taken on this role as kind of representing all of the golden artists that were involved at the beginning to make sure that the story still is told and that the proper story is told and that all parties are included in the story now.
Right.
Which is fine. I mean, I don't mind taking that role. I'm an educator already, although I teach math. It's still, informing the masses of, true history and telling this intriguing story of what happened.
For sure. Excellent. Now, last question, just going to cons all over the country, are there any other, I guess, descendants of Golden Age comic book creators that kind of do the same thing that you do that you know of? Like, what are Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster's, like, heirs doing? Like, do any other heirs ever come out and talk about their relatives at all? Or
I believe they did. I did get to meet, I want to say, Siegel's granddaughter at one of the movies. I don't really see them, but the Christy Marston, who's the granddaughter of the creator of Wonder Woman, she's very active. She does go to a lot of conventions. Also, Jerry's son was active for a little while, but I mean, he's got his own career going, but he's done a few conventions with me. The Kirby Grandchildren I did meet a couple years ago when they were celebrating Jack Kirby's 100th. So, I mean, there's a few out there. It's, I think it's just a little different for each family on how they want to deal with it.
Right.
Nikki Wheeler, she is a huge advocate for her grandfather, who actually was the creator of National Comics. She's just wrote a book. She's written a couple books. They're reprinting a lot of what her grandfather did. He was really the founder of the comic industry.
Yeah, Malcolm Wheeler Nicholson, correct? Yeah.
And so she's very active. And I've been at quite a few conventions with her. So, I mean, there's a few of us out there that are very active as far as sharing the history of comics and of these characters. And, keeping it an active story, because it could, just get brushed under the rug like everything else in history. But, it's so important that people who are new to comics or even not new to comics to know the history of what has become this massive culture and why we celebrate these characters and why they're still so relevant in our culture 80 years later. So, we feel like we have this role that we kind of have to pursue and we try to stay as active as we can. So there's a few of us out there.
Yeah, for sure. And that's great to hear. Speaking of Christy Marston, I have a movie for you now. Have you seen Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman?
I fell asleep during it.
Oh, you fell asleep during it. Okay, it's actually a good movie. Yeah.
I put it on, like I got into bed, I put it on, I started it, and I was out.
Yeah, that happens to me too. So, yeah.
It's kind of a mixed bag because, I heard her side of it, and she was very angry when the movie came out because there were a lot of, falsehoods in the movie. Mm-hmm. So, I'm kind of like, I don't want to be tainted by watching it, and I kind of want to watch it. You know what I mean? So that's why I'm not rushing to watch it again, because I'm like, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't watch it.
Yeah, for sure. But Athena, thank you so much for agreeing to do this and coming to talk with the fans. I could just see from the comments here, people really, really enjoyed the stream and listening to you talk about Bill Finger. It's definitely been a pleasure. I would not only like to thank you for joining us this evening, but I also would like to thank you and your family for your contributions to pop culture and giving us the Batman. It's just, Batman's gonna be around in 100 years and even more, so it's definitely quite the legacy to be representing. So thank you so much. And thank you. Yeah. Thank you all for joining us this evening. It definitely was a treat, and I will catch you all in the next episode. It's Friday Night Geeks. Go out and have some fun. Thanks so much.